I used to think life was simple. Not easy, not spectacular, just simple. I believed that if you gave loyalty, it would return. If you gave love freely, it would come back to you in kind. I believed that silence could protect peace, that avoiding conflict was its own kind of strength. I believed in honesty, in family, in people. I thought those things were constants, like the walls of my home or the air I breathed. I was wrong. I grew up quietly observing, quietly obeying. I avoided arguments not because I feared them, but because I believed that calm could hold the world together. I believed that if I held my ground without raising my voice, the people I loved would see me, would understand me, and would never leave. I trusted my family. I trusted the people closest to me. I trusted a person who I thought was my safe place, someone whose eyes reflected understanding and whose smile felt like home. In that life, small gestures meant everything. A shared joke, a glance across the room, a hand held for a moment too brief to notice. These were the threads I wove into my sense of belonging. I thought those threads were unbreakable. I thought the people I loved were on the same page as me, walking the same path, following the same invisible rules of loyalty and love. I believed I was part of something permanent. And yet, there were signs. Tiny ones. Messages I sent that never got answered. Conversations that abruptly ended when I walked into the room. Glances that turned cold without reason. I noticed them, but I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself that silence was safer, that confrontation would only make things worse. I convinced myself that my instincts were wrong, that I was imagining the distance growing between us. I ignored the growing void because I was afraid to look at it. I feared that acknowledging it would mean facing a truth I wasn't ready to accept. I was flawed, yes, too cautious, too forgiving, too eager to believe in people. But I was sincere. I believed in the world the way a child believes in the sun, and I carried that belief like armor. I believed that the people I loved would never choose against me, that loyalty was mutual, that love was always returned in kind. The irony of it is painful, even now. The people I trusted the most, the ones I thought were unshakable in their devotion to me, were already choosing against me. Their decisions were quiet, subtle, almost invisible, but the effect was like ice seeping into my bones. I felt it, even if I refused to name it. I clung to my illusions, because naming the truth felt like losing everything. And maybe, in some ways, it was. That was the life I believed in, quiet, orderly, filled with trust that was, in reality, misplaced. I was a man who gave freely and silently, who assumed love would always find its way back. I was a man who thought peace was the absence of conflict, not the presence of honesty. I was a man who didn't see the cracks until they became chasms. Looking back now, I see it clearly. I see the fragility in what I held dear, the vulnerability in my faith, the danger of believing that people would never betray what I held sacred. I see the truth I refused to face. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones already walking away. And in believing otherwise, you are the one left behind, not because of weakness, but because of honesty and faith no one else shares. I was flawed. I was sincere. And in that quiet, ordinary life, I learned a truth that would haunt me. Love and loyalty are never guarantees. They are choices. And the people you choose to believe in might not choose you back. I remember that night with a clarity that still makes my chest tighten. The air was warm, the light soft, the kind of ordinary evening that promised nothing, and yet, it was the night everything I believed in fractured. I had gone to dinner expecting the usual warmth, the comfort of familiarity. I didn't know then that I was walking into a quiet storm that had been brewing for months, maybe years, without my knowledge. It started with a conversation. Polite, measured words. Laughter in the right places, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. But beneath it, there was something else. A current I couldn't name at first, like a vibration under the floorboards that only my gut could feel. Then it hit me, the realization that the person I trusted most, the one I thought would never betray me, had been working against me all along. Not with shouting or confrontation, not with drama or chaos, but quietly, calmly, politely, strategically. I replay their words in my mind even now. Every joke I thought was shared, every compliment, every look of understanding, all rehearsed lies designed to keep me blind. And my family didn't look at me with concern. They didn't step in. They didn't even hesitate. They were aligned, quietly, methodically, with the person I had trusted above all. It wasn't anger or malice that hit me first. It was humiliation. The slow, creeping awareness that the people I thought were my anchor had, in subtle ways, abandoned me. I felt frozen. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My hands rested on the table, but they were not mine. They felt distant, alien. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream until the walls themselves acknowledged the injustice I was feeling. But something heavier kept me silent. Not shock, not fear, something worse. Disbelief that the world I had trusted could betray me without a sound. Every smile, every promise, every casual word came rushing back to me like a wave crashing over rocks. I saw the nights I had stayed up worrying for them, the moments I had trusted blindly, the times I had given my all expecting nothing less than truth in return. And all of it had been meaningless. Not because I was naive, but because I had placed my faith in people who were choosing a different story, a different path, one that did not include me. The calmness of the betrayal made it sting even more. There was no drama, no confrontation to fight against. Just the polite acknowledgement of my existence while my world crumbled silently around me. I realized that trust, once broken, leaves a vacuum you cannot fill with logic or reasoning. You cannot bargain with it. You cannot plead. You can only witness it, and feel the slow erosion of the life you thought was yours. I didn't leave. I didn't argue. I stayed, sitting through the evening as if invisible, feeling each subtle alignment of loyalty against me like a nail driven into the floor of my life. I watched as my place in my family, the place I had always assumed was permanent, was quietly stolen. I realized, in that cold, devastating moment, that I was no longer the person they counted on. I was no longer part of the center, no longer deserving of their attention or their protection. I was an outsider in the life I had lived believing was safe. And yet, in that silence, I understood something I had refused to see before. Betrayal does not need noise. It does not require confrontation. It can arrive in calm tones, polite laughter, and steady gazes. It can be deliberate, careful, and invisible until it has taken everything from you. I felt every smile they had given me, every word of encouragement, every shared memory, all of it now reframed in the light of truth. Every moment I had trusted blindly was a moment I had surrendered power. By the end of that night, I was broken, but not entirely. I had lost more than trust. I had lost my place in my own family. And yet, as I walked away quietly, I realized that the world had shown me its truth, whether I liked it or not. My silence, which I had once thought protected peace, had betrayed me instead. And the person I had been, the one who gave freely, trusted blindly, and believed in others over himself, was no longer enough. I went to bed that night with a sense of displacement I cannot describe. The home I knew felt foreign. The people I loved felt like strangers. And in that quiet, cold space, I understood the hardest truth I had ever faced. Sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones who will redefine your world without even a word. And sometimes, the silence you keep becomes the thing that defines you most. You don't wake up after a night like that feeling different. You wake up feeling empty. Like something important slipped out of you while you were asleep and never came back. You move through the next days on instinct alone, showering, eating, answering messages you don't mean, nodding at conversations you're not present in. Your body shows up, but you don't. You feel like a ghost haunting your own life. Every quiet moment becomes dangerous, because silence gives your mind space to replay everything. The looks you ignored. The pauses you excused. The moment you should have spoken but didn't. You hear their voices again, calm and confident, while yours stays trapped in your chest. You imagine different versions of that night, versions where you speak, where you ask the hard question, where you don't let yourself disappear at the table. But those versions don't exist. All that exists is what you did. Nothing. You tell people you're fine. You say it automatically, without thinking. Fine becomes your shield. Fine becomes your lie. Friends notice something is off. They ask softer questions, look at you longer, but you shut it down quickly. You don't want pity. You don't want explanations. Mostly, you don't want to admit that something inside you is cracking. So you distance yourself. You convince yourself it's easier to be alone than to explain a pain you don't fully understand yet. At night, the weight hits harder. That's when the questions come. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Was I too easy to overlook? You start blaming yourself for things that once felt like strengths. You tell yourself you were too kind, too patient, too quiet. You replay moments where you chose peace over honesty and wonder if that choice slowly erased you from the picture. The shame settles in quietly, like dust, covering everything you once felt sure about. Anger shows up too, but you don't know where to put it. You're angry at them, yes, but you're angrier at yourself. Angry for trusting. Angry for staying silent. Angry for believing that loyalty was something everyone valued the same way you did. You ask yourself how you could have been so blind, how you missed what now feels obvious. And the worst part is realizing that no one stopped you from being erased. They just watched. And you let them. That truth hurts more than the betrayal itself. Because betrayal feels like something done to you. But silence feels like something you did to yourself. You thought staying quiet would protect you. You thought it would keep things stable, keep love intact. But all it did was teach people that your absence wouldn't cause resistance. That your feelings could be stepped over without consequence. That you would swallow pain to keep the room calm. Slowly, painfully, you begin to understand this. Silence didn't make you strong. It made you invisible. It didn't preserve your place. It gave others permission to take it. Every time you chose not to speak, someone else chose for you. Every time you avoided conflict, the narrative moved forward without your voice. And now, you're living in the result of that choice. You start noticing how heavy everything feels. Conversations exhaust you. Smiles feel borrowed. You're carrying grief for a version of yourself that believed being good would always be enough. You're mourning the loss of safety, of belonging, of certainty. And beneath all of it is a growing awareness that this pain won't fade on its own. That pretending isn't healing. That waiting quietly hasn't saved you before, and it won't now. There's a realization forming, slow but undeniable. Nothing will change unless you do. Not them. Not the past. Not the way things unfolded. You can't undo the silence, but you can decide what comes after it. And for the first time since that night, you stop asking what you should have said back then. You start asking a harder question. What will happen if you stay silent again? The moment I decided to walk away, it felt like stepping off a cliff while everyone I loved stood silently at the edge, watching. Not shouting, not pleading, just watching. And in a strange, terrifying way, that silence gave me permission. Permission to stop explaining myself. Permission to stop begging for understanding I would never receive. Permission to finally honor the truth I had been hiding from myself. I didn't belong in that circle anymore. Walking away isn't dramatic. It doesn't feel like liberation at first. It feels like emptiness pressing in from all sides. Rooms I used to fill with laughter now echo with my own footsteps. Nights are long, unbearably quiet. The phone doesn't ring. Messages go unanswered. Birthdays pass without acknowledgement. Even the memories that used to feel warm now sting with a cold, subtle ache. Loneliness doesn't roar. It whispers, relentless, until you wonder if you were ever meant to be seen at all. But in that silence, something extraordinary begins. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I start hearing my own voice. Not the voice I trained to speak softly, the one that asked permission before expressing pain. Not the voice that echoed the opinions and expectations of everyone else. My real voice, the one buried under years of compliance, compromise, and quiet suffering. It trembles at first, small and unsure, but it's mine. And listening to it feels like coming home after years of wandering in a foreign city. The first person who notices isn't loud, and they don't make a spectacle of it. They don't try to fix me. They don't lecture or demand that I forgive or explain. They just listen. They hear the fractures without judgment. Their presence is quiet, steady, unassuming, like a candle burning in the dark, gentle enough not to blind but warm enough to be seen. For the first time in what feels like forever, I am allowed to exist without compromise. I am allowed to speak, to breathe, to sit in my own skin without apology. It's not a cure. It's not a sudden happiness or a triumphant return. Walking alone doesn't erase the betrayal or the pain. There are mornings when the weight is still unbearable, when I curl in bed and wonder if anyone will ever truly see me, if I will ever feel whole again. But each step away from those who hurt me, each night I spend in the quiet, becomes practice in claiming myself. Each moment is a reminder that my life, my thoughts, my feelings, are mine to honor first. And then, slowly, I begin to notice the small growths within the loneliness. A thought I had been afraid to entertain blooms fully. Maybe I can exist outside the life I thought was permanent. Maybe my worth isn't tied to the people who chose against me. Maybe strength doesn't come from loyalty returned, but from loyalty to myself. Each day, I listen more closely to that thought, allowing it to take root, letting it guide me even when the world remains silent. The supportive presence of someone neutral, someone unaligned, becomes my anchor. Not because they take away the pain, but because they reflect a simple truth. I am not broken beyond recognition. I am fractured, yes, but alive. I am learning the contours of my own heart without the noise of expectation. Their belief in me, not as a challenge to be fixed but as a person to be heard, begins to heal spaces I didn't know were so raw. I see, finally, that human connection doesn't always demand compromise or surrender. It can simply be understanding. I walk through empty streets at night, past quiet houses and dim streetlights, and for the first time, I feel a strange kind of freedom. Not happiness, not yet, but clarity. My past choices, my silence, my misplaced trust, they all weigh on me, but they no longer define me. I am reclaiming myself with every step, learning that walking alone is not a punishment but a beginning. The night becomes less terrifying when I realize that I am not truly alone. Even if the people who hurt me remain distant, even if their voices are gone, there are others, unexpected, quiet, unassuming, who will meet me without judgment. And in their presence, I begin to understand something vital. Survival is not about waiting for rescue. It's about choosing yourself when no one else will. By the time I close my eyes that night, the quiet no longer suffocates. It is a space I can inhabit, a space where I can finally hear my own heartbeat and recognize it as mine. And that, for the first time since the betrayal, feels like enough. The truth doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly, in fragments that don't make sense at first. I start noticing it in messages I stumble upon, in pauses I had ignored, in the way certain people look at each other when they think I'm not watching. The betrayal I experienced wasn't sudden. It wasn't born out of a single night, a single word, a single decision. It was planned long before I even saw the cracks. Every omission, every polite lie, every smile that didn't reach the eyes was part of a careful design meant to erase me. At first, the clarity makes my head spin. Rage rises, hot and uncontrollable. How could they? How could they plan this so methodically, while I trusted them blindly? But as the days pass, as I collect pieces of their story in stolen moments and quiet observations, the rage begins to shape itself differently. It becomes clarity. It is no longer just anger at what was done to me. It is understanding of why it was done. Jealousy, fear, pride, convenience. Each motivation unveils itself like a page turned slowly in a book I wasn't allowed to read before. Jealousy for the trust one had earned without demanding it. Fear that my sincerity would reveal their weaknesses. Pride that could not admit a mistake or share the spotlight. Convenience that made it easier to side with one person over me than to challenge the quiet erosion they had created. It is human, yet it is devastating. I feel betrayed not only by the act itself but by the depth of calculation I hadn't imagined anyone could muster. And yet, beneath the fury, beneath the shock, something shifts inside me. I stop seeing myself as weak. I stop blaming the trust one once held dear. What I thought was weakness, my kindness, my patience, my silence, was never the problem. The problem was their fear, their insecurity, their inability to stand in the light of honesty. They are not strong. They are afraid. Afraid of being seen for what they are. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that my sincerity could never be manipulated to their advantage. I don't confront them. Not yet. There is no yelling, no dramatic scenes, no immediate reckoning. I simply watch. I listen. I let every truth settle into the corners of my mind, giving me perspective I had been denied. I see the ways in which my absence unsettles them, the subtle calculations they make to maintain a facade. And I realize, for the first time, that the power dynamic has begun to shift, not in the world around me, not in their eyes, but in me. I am no longer a passive participant in their schemes. I am awake. I am aware. And awareness carries a quiet, dangerous strength. Family complexity reveals itself in unexpected ways. I notice patterns I had ignored, alliances that seemed natural but were forged from fear or convenience, unspoken resentments passed off as humor, obligations misrepresented as loyalty. I begin to understand why people acted the way they did, and yet, understanding does not excuse them. It only arms me. It allows me to navigate the space I once occupied blindly, now seeing the invisible currents that had carried me into their trap. Every observation strengthens me. Every hidden truth I uncover becomes a tool. And yet, even as clarity grows, so does my patience. I do not act impulsively. I do not lash out. The betrayal may have stolen trust, but it cannot steal time, insight, or the self-possession I am slowly reclaiming. I allow myself to feel rage, yes, but it is measured. I allow myself to feel hurt, yes, but it is purposeful. Every emotion is a teacher, every revelation a step forward. By the time I sit quietly in my apartment, the pieces of the puzzle finally forming a coherent picture, I understand something profound. What was done to me was not inevitable. It was chosen by people who were afraid to face truth, afraid to be honest, afraid to honor loyalty they did not understand. And in seeing that, I feel a shift unlike anything I have experienced before. I am no longer a victim. I am no longer powerless. I am awake, aware, and ready, not for confrontation yet, but for the next stage of my own becoming. The night stretches on, and I allow myself a quiet, private smile, not of triumph, not of revenge, but of recognition. I see them as they are. I see myself as I am. And for the first time in a long time, the world feels like something I can navigate with my eyes open. I learned that transformation doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't arrive with shouts or dramatic declarations. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, in the moments no one is watching. I stopped waiting for approval. I stopped seeking validation. I stopped hoping that the people who had once ignored me would suddenly remember my existence. Instead, I turned inward. I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece, in silence. The first step was discipline. I reclaimed the routines I had abandoned when the betrayal consumed me. I rose early, even when it was hard. I pushed myself to work on things that mattered, not to anyone else, but to me. I read, I wrote, I trained my mind and body, sharpening them like tools that no one else could steal. It was grueling at first. Some days, I wanted to give up, to retreat into the loneliness that had once been my only companion. But slowly, the repetition built strength. Not the kind you can see on the outside, but the kind that roots itself deep in the marrow of your bones. Emotionally, I became vigilant. I noticed when my old impulses returned, the urge to explain myself, to justify my silence, to apologize for being hurt. And I stopped. I reminded myself that my voice is mine, and it doesn't need permission to exist. I learned to respond with thought, not reaction. To measure my words and control my emotions, not to suppress them, but to channel them. Where I once reacted, I now chose. Where I once stayed silent out of fear, I now listened first, to myself. Boundaries became my armor. I stopped allowing people to cross lines I had once ignored in the name of peace. I learned to say no, not defensively, not angrily, but with quiet certainty. Each no built a small fortress around me, one that no one could breach with indifference or manipulation. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of self-respect, not dependent on others' approval, not contingent on their treatment of me. I had become my own authority, and that alone carried a power no betrayal could take away. People began to notice. Not in the way I expected. There was no applause, no sudden acknowledgement of my change. It was subtle, a pause in conversation, a glance that lingered a moment longer, a cautious respect in the way they addressed me. Those who had once ignored me or treated me as inconsequential now observed quietly, measuring, perhaps questioning, perhaps even fearing. I didn't seek recognition. I didn't crave it. But it was undeniable. I had shifted, and the world, slowly, had to account for it. Confidence became internal. I no longer needed to prove anything externally. I spoke less, but every word carried weight. I acted with intention, moved with purpose, and watched carefully how my silence, once a tool of self-erasure, had become a weapon of subtle authority. The people who had once underestimated me now faced someone they didn't recognize, not because I had sought revenge, but because I had chosen myself over them, consistently, deliberately, without fanfare. The transformation wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. It demanded patience, restraint, and a level of self-honesty I had avoided for years. I had to confront my own weaknesses, admit where I had faltered, and rebuild not only my exterior but my interior. I had to face the fear that I would never be enough, the insecurity that had allowed me to be pushed aside, and replace it with unwavering belief in my own worth. And slowly, day by day, that belief took root. I became someone I had always wanted to be, someone steady, unshakable, self-reliant, and unafraid of solitude. The quiet strength I had cultivated radiated naturally, without effort, without announcement. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. I didn't need to confront the people who had hurt me or show them the difference. The change itself was proof. The shift in my presence, the firmness in my posture, the calm certainty in my decisions, it spoke louder than any words ever could. I am no longer the person who stayed silent out of fear. I am no longer defined by their choices or their betrayals. I am someone who chooses. Every day, every decision, every boundary I set is a testament to that choice. And the people who once dismissed me, who took my quietness for weakness, now see someone they didn't expect, a person who stands firm not out of anger, but out of self-respect. In becoming someone they didn't expect, I realized the most important truth. Power isn't taken, and it isn't demanded. Power is reclaimed quietly, persistently, internally. It is earned in the small victories of discipline, the subtle victories of self-respect, the invisible victories of emotional control. And once it is yours, no one can ever take it away again. I didn't plan for this. I didn't orchestrate it. I didn't even hope for it. And yet, from a distance, I watched as everything began to unravel for those who had betrayed me. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the first cracks in a frozen lake. Lies they had built their lives on began to collide. Secrets, carefully hidden, surfaced in ways that could not be ignored. The alliances I had once envied or feared shifted unexpectedly, showing fragility beneath the facade they had spent years maintaining. I observed it quietly, feeling a mix of emotions I hadn't anticipated. There was satisfaction, yes, but it wasn't sweet or victorious. It wasn't about seeing them fall, not in the way vengeance feels in stories. It was a quieter, steadier feeling, rooted in recognition. Justice, even in small doses, has a weight that cruelty cannot match. It was watching balance assert itself in the world they had tried to manipulate, seeing the consequences of choices they had made, choices that once seemed clever and harmless. Relationships that had seemed unshakable faltered. Conversations became strained. Family members who had aligned against me found themselves confronting truths they had ignored, seeing each other in new, uncomfortable ways. The antagonist, the person who had hurt me most, found that their control was slipping, that the careful structures they had built to isolate and undermine me were collapsing from their own fragility. It was ironic, almost poetic, to see their plans undone without my hand ever touching them. And I felt something new, power. But it was not the power I had once imagined, fueled by anger or revenge. It was power tempered by restraint, by clarity, by the knowledge that I had already won without having to fight. They came to me, eventually, one by one. Apologies, explanations, attempts to rewrite history. A smile here, a justification there, words meant to soften guilt or manipulate perception. But I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to justify the life I had built in silence, the person I had become. For the first time, I could say nothing and mean it. I could walk away and feel no fear, no hesitation, no craving for their acknowledgement. That was the true power, choosing when to engage and when to remain untouchable, refusing to allow their attempts to rewrite the past to affect the present. I realized that the most devastating choice I could make wasn't in words, but in absence, in the quiet strength of knowing my own worth and refusing to compromise it. It was strange, feeling this mix of satisfaction and sadness. Because I had loved these people once. I had trusted them, given them my loyalty, placed my life in alignment with theirs. And seeing them unravel, even as justice rather than revenge, stirred something deep inside me. The sadness wasn't for their misfortune, it was for what we had lost together, for the innocence of belief I had carried that was now forever gone. That part of me would never return, and the gravity of that loss was undeniable. I noticed the regret in their eyes before I ever heard it spoken aloud. Small hints, fleeting glances, a hesitation in conversation. Family members who had once turned away now paused, perhaps realizing too late that their decisions had consequences beyond what they anticipated. But the shift didn't belong to me. It was the universe, life itself, reclaiming balance. And I observed it without interference, without gloating, without malice. This was not victory in the traditional sense. It was a revelation. I didn't need to fight to regain what was mine. I didn't need to prove myself to them or demand retribution. I had built my life quietly, strengthened myself, and allowed truth to act as its own force. Watching their world falter reminded me that power comes not from retaliation, but from resilience, from the unshakable certainty of your own integrity. By the time their attempts to reconnect reached me, I had already made a choice that no one could undo. I would walk away, silently, leaving them to confront the consequences of their own actions. And as I did, I understood something profound. The satisfaction of justice lies not in inflicting pain, but in observing truth unfold, unmanipulated, uncorrupted. It is calm, deliberate, and enduring, far more powerful than rage or revenge. That night, as I closed the door on the past and settled into the quiet of my own life, I felt a clarity I had never known before. The people who had hurt me were still present in the world, still walking paths intertwined with mine, yet utterly powerless over me. The betrayal had shaped them, but it had also shaped me into someone steady, strong, and unmovable. I had survived, grown, and emerged with a power they could never comprehend because it was never about them. It was always about me. And in that quiet triumph, I realized the ultimate truth. Revenge is fleeting, but justice, earned through patience and self-respect, is permanent. I stand at the threshold, the door before me neither grand nor symbolic, but heavy with every memory it represents. Behind it, the people who shaped my pain, the ones who betrayed the trust one had given freely, are waiting. Their voices are calm, measured, rehearsed, but I hear the tremor beneath. Fear, hesitation, guilt, apologies that are words without weight, attempts to rewrite history that no longer belongs to them. For a moment, I hesitate. Not because I doubt myself, but because I feel the full gravity of what has passed. I feel the years of quiet suffering, the nights I spent alone replaying conversations, the moments I blamed myself for being too kind, too silent, too trusting. I feel the invisible scars etched into my heart, the spaces where love was taken and never returned. I feel everything that I lost along the way. And yet, standing there, I notice something remarkable. I am no longer that person who stayed silent. I am no longer defined by their choices or their betrayal. I am not afraid. I am steady. I am aware of the power I hold, not over them, but over myself, over my own life, over the decisions I make from this moment forward. I can choose. I can decide. And in that choice lies my freedom. They speak. Words tumble out, apologies, explanations, pleas for understanding. But I hear the hesitation in their tone, the subtle admission that what they did was wrong, and that the timing of this reconciliation is their own desperate attempt to repair something that can no longer be repaired. I listen, not to defend myself, not to argue, not to justify. I listen to witness, to acknowledge, and to decide what I will do with the fragments of my past they offer. I reflect on how far I've come. I remember the nights I cried alone, the days I walked through empty streets, the months I spent rebuilding myself quietly, deliberately, without the approval of anyone who had once dismissed me. I remember the mentor who simply listened, the moments of clarity when I first recognized my own voice, the discipline and boundaries that shaped me into someone they could no longer manipulate or define. I see the strength I forged in silence, the confidence I earned in solitude, and the self-respect that cannot be stolen. And then, the decision becomes clear. I will not reopen the door to a past that no longer serves me. I will not allow their apologies, their explanations, or their fear to alter the person I have become. I will close it, not with anger, not with malice, but with calm certainty. I will close it because I owe it to myself to protect the life I have painstakingly rebuilt, the peace I have carved from the ruins of betrayal. But I forgive. Not for them. Not because they deserve it. But for myself. I forgive my own silence, my own misplaced trust, my own pain. I forgive the person I was, the one who believed loyalty was enough, the one who thought love was always returned. And in that forgiveness, I find release. I let go of the weight that once chained me to the past. I let go of the need to prove, to argue, to justify. I let go of the old version of me. Closing the door is not dramatic. There is no shouting, no slammed fists, no tears falling in front of witnesses. There is only the quiet finality of a choice made from strength, clarity, and self-respect. I step away, leaving behind the expectations, the manipulations, the betrayals that once held power over my life. And in that quiet act, I feel something I have not felt in years: peace. The air feels different after that moment. Lighter. Full of possibility. I am not bound by the mistakes of others or by my own previous weakness. I am free to move forward, to live fully in a life I define, to carry the lessons without carrying the weight of their choices. The past exists, but it no longer rules me. I am the keeper of my own story, the architect of my own peace. And for the first time in a long time, I smile, not out of triumph, not out of bitterness, but out of quiet understanding. I have chosen myself. I have closed the door to what no longer serves me, and in doing so, I have opened a door to a life unshakable, untouchable, and entirely my own. I walk forward, not looking back, not needing to. And in that simple, deliberate step, I feel whole again. I stand now in a life that feels solid beneath my feet. Not perfect, not flashy, not built to impress anyone else. But it is mine. Every decision, every choice, every boundary I have drawn, every moment I spent rebuilding myself, this life is the result. And in it, I am calm. I am strong. I am steady in a way I never thought possible when I was younger, when I trusted blindly, when I gave endlessly and quietly while expecting the same in return. Looking back, I see clearly the lessons betrayal taught me. Not the bitter lessons, though there were many, but the truths I could never have understood otherwise. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are lines meant to protect what is yours, what matters, what you will not surrender. Silence is not always strength. Sometimes it is surrender, sometimes it is permission. And self-worth is never borrowed, never contingent, never earned from the approval of others. It is something you claim, every day, quietly, deliberately, for yourself. I reflect on the person I once was, the one who stayed quiet to avoid conflict, who smiled while hiding the hurt, who believed that loyalty alone would keep the people I love close. I see now that I was sincere, yes, but naive. That trust, when given without discernment, can be manipulated. That love, when given freely to those who cannot or will not reciprocate, leaves you exposed. I survived that exposure, and in surviving, I learned to protect myself not by walls of bitterness, but by clarity, by purpose, by the quiet authority of knowing my own value. There were moments along the way when I doubted myself, when I wondered if walking away, staying silent, choosing solitude over confrontation, had been the right choice. But the life I live now answers that question every day. I am no longer waiting to be chosen, acknowledged, or validated. I have stopped looking for approval from those who cannot see me clearly. I define myself now by what I have built, by what I nurture, by the integrity and strength I maintain in every aspect of my life. The people who once betrayed me are no longer central to my existence. Their actions shaped part of my path, yes, but they do not define it. I am free to observe without anger, to acknowledge without longing, to remember without being held hostage by the past. The scars remain, but they are mine, and I wear them not as shame but as testimony. They remind me how far I have come, how much I survived, and how much I can endure without surrendering the life I choose to live. I have learned that power is not revenge. Power is the ability to move forward, to choose yourself in every situation, to act with intention rather than impulse. I have learned that hope is not a wish for the world to be different, but a commitment to make yourself stronger regardless of the world's choices. And I have learned that peace is not given. It is earned, painstakingly, through discipline, clarity, and the courage to step away from what no longer serves you. Now, when I speak, my words carry weight, not because I demand it, but because I have learned to choose them carefully, deliberately. When I act, my actions are rooted in purpose, not reaction. I do not flinch at betrayal or rejection because I have discovered that the only true betrayal would be failing myself again. I have learned to value my own voice, my own presence, my own integrity above all else. And that, more than anything else, defines the person I have become. I am no longer the person who allowed silence to erase me. I am no longer the person who waited for others to choose me. I am no longer the person whose value depended on the loyalty of those too blind to see it. I am someone who chooses myself every single day, in every single moment. And in that choice, I have built something permanent, strength, resilience, and a quiet, unshakable peace that no betrayal, no disappointment, no manipulation can touch. Looking ahead, I do not fear the future. I do not hope for recognition. I do not wait for anyone to acknowledge the person I have become. I simply continue, deliberately, firmly, with awareness and self-respect, shaping a life that is mine alone. And in that life, I find joy in the small things, satisfaction in growth, and freedom in the knowledge that I am enough, entirely, for myself. I have survived betrayal. I have endured loss. I have rebuilt. And now, I walk forward not defined by what was taken, but by everything I have created. I am whole. I am calm. I am unbreakable. I am the person I chose to become.